Well, good morning everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me here to speak to you today. Now, as you've probably noticed, we're in the middle of a general election, and as an arm's length government organisation, that puts some very serious constraints as Network Rail on what we can say during the run-up to the election, during the period of PERDA. So my presentation is slightly constrained today, and I apologise in advance for that. And I'd also like to apologise at the beginning to say that unfortunately I won't therefore be able to take any questions either. That said, I do hope I've got an interesting and informative presentation for you today, and I'd like to start with a video. So if you could hear Jared speaking, he would be telling you how fantastic it is to be lifting into place the network arch at Odsal Court. So this happened back in February, I think it was the 21st. And it is the world's first asymmetric network arch. So a fantastic achievement using two of the largest cranes in the UK. And just to make matters more complicated, normally if you're building a network arch, you'd put the deck in first, and then you'd build the arches, and then you'd carry on from there. But unfortunately, the constraints in the programme meant that we had to do it slightly differently. So we actually built the two halves of the arches separately, horizontally, and then we lifted them, braced them, and then very casually, I have to say, the team lifted them into place with some unbelievably tight tolerances. This is the main arch that goes over the River Irwell, and was carried out absolutely faultlessly, and it has transformed the skyline of Manchester. So we've been talking for a long time about the cord coming into place. But the main element is there now. We've been working busily over the last bank holidays to do the joining up of the sections from either end. And the programme is progressing really well and on time to be completed for Christmas. Excellent. So I wanted to start with that video because for me it typifies the kind of work that we do as infrastructure projects in Network Rail. It's a highly complex programme, innovative engineering, and relies on some real teamwork and collaboration, and we are in fact part of an alliance with other companies delivering this work. It also impacts a lot of the Victorian heritage coming from the 1830s, so Stephenson's time, and we've had to be very sympathetic to the heritage that sits around us in Manchester. And it's great to be delivering these major programmes of civil and rail engineering, respecting the heritage, but at the same time it certainly causes us a few issues, which I'll come back to a little later in the presentation. So just to give you a bit of context about Network Rail, so we obviously run, maintain and develop Britain's railway. So we are the infrastructure manager. You can see the statistics for yourself, and it is a huge network. I'm also very proud to say that it's the safest railway in Europe, something that we don't take lightly, and this is at the forefront of our mind in everything we do. And that's even more surprising when you consider that we are Europe's most intensively used major railway. And despite that, we managed to keep it very safe. And it's not just passenger safety that we take seriously. These are the statistics for workforce safety for the contractors that support infrastructure projects. So you'll see in the last 2 years we've made huge strides in improving lost time injury frequency rate. So the year before last we reduced lost time injury frequency rate by 26%. In the year just gone we've reduced it by another 16%, and we are continually striving to make it ever safer for our workforce to be delivering this complex infrastructure. And that's against the backdrop of real growing capacity challenge. And for me, this really drives out two things. The capacity challenge says that the railway has been very successful in the past. It's doubled since privatisation. You'll know all of the statistics in terms of increases in passenger numbers. And that means that the work that we do as infrastructure projects, renewing and enhancing the railway, has never been more important. And of course, it's not just passengers that use our lines. We often overlook the fact that freight is a really important user of the railways. And again, you can read the statistics on the slide, but two really spring out for me. The bottom one that says that 40% of all construction materials that are used in London are moved into London by rail. And you can only imagine what the difference that would make if in fact it was coming in on the back of trucks. Now, the statistic that matters the most to me as part of the infrastructure projects team is the second from bottom. So 25% of freight services run between 1 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the morning. And this is normally a key period of time where my team are trying to get onto the railway to carry out our work. And it is very difficult and ever more challenging with the amount of freight that operates on the network. So passenger numbers, again, set to double in the next 25 years. And that, for me, really sets the context of the work that we're trying to do. So, what do we do all day? So I just wanted to give you a few headline statistics of the year just gone. So last year, Network Rail delivered £6.6 billion of new infrastructure, either in renewals or in enhancements. And of that 6.6 billion, around 5.7 billion was delivered by my team. So as Nigel said, we spend about 2 out of every £3 that comes to Network Rail. So it's an enormous amount of work. I mean, that represents 13 Olympic stadiums being built on the live railway. And a recent study that was carried out for us by Nichols said that we actually deliver 22% of all UK infrastructure. Looking at that a different way, we actually deliver 4% of all UK construction. When you consider that includes house building and all general construction, it's a huge number that's being delivered on the railway every day. And of course the railway, as I've shown, is very intensively used. And as we like to say, it's like carrying out open heart surgery on someone who's trying to run the marathon at the same time. No mean feat. And then if we look more specifically at an average week of infrastructure projects, again, you can see the vast quantities of materials that we use. It's delivered by around 137 engineering trains. Obviously that peaks significantly at bank holidays, and I'll touch on those a bit later. And as well as carrying out £110 million of work every single week, we're often called in to deal with the ravages of the English weather. So this is a photograph of Dawlish, which was repaired in just a few weeks. And more recently, the seawall at Dover, we managed to hand back early. Another fantastic engineering achievement. So now I'd just like to touch on some of the projects. So Crossrail, the main Crossrail programme, obviously being delivered by Crossrail Limited. As infrastructure projects, we're delivering about £2.3 billion of work for Crossrail. So this is effectively the stuff that's outside of the portals. So all of the on-network works, the 29 stations, the new track layouts, the new signalling, the new power supplies that will support the new trains are all being delivered by my team very successfully at the moment as well. London Bridge, part of the £5 billion Thameslink programme, a huge engineering endeavour. When I've been to London Bridge, the thing that surprises me the most, because you do tend to take for granted the scale and complexity of the engineering, the bit that really gets me is who even thought that it was possible to do this? When you look at the station, it's such a busy interchange, and effectively we have burrowed out all of the Victorian arches underneath an operating station and built an enormous concourse, 2/3 of which is now opened at the end of last year, and again bang on track to be opened in the year ahead. Birmingham New Street, just down the road, fantastic. This formed a really big part of my early year in Network Rail, and what a stunning station this is. And this really, for me, says what you can do with a station in the middle of a city. And my favourite quote came from one of the visitors, who said that we've changed it from a dungeon of despair to a cathedral of light, and I think that's really true. And Manchester Victoria, a very similar style of transformation. And again, this is the point at which I just want to touch back on that Victorian heritage. So Manchester Victoria opened in 1844. It's got a whole series of Grade 2 listed buildings and structures, and in carrying out the transformation of the station, putting in this fantastic 8,500 square metre roof using the same materials that are on the Eden project, we've been very sympathetic to the existing station. So the works that we've carried out on the station mosaics, on Soldiers Gate, on the wall map and mosaics are all still there, and I think it's a great balance of heritage in a modern age. And the Great North Rail project, of which the Odsal Cord, you can see sitting in the centre, has played such an important part. So only 300 metres of new track, but it joins Manchester and Manchester Piccadilly with heavy rail for the first time. We're also doing works planned for Oxford Road and Piccadilly, and in the wider northwest we've got quite a significant programme, about £150 million of upgrades, and the rolling programme of electrification in the northwest continues apace. So what does all this mean? It's not just about dealing with capacity, it's also dealing with cost. And you can see that since 2003-04, operating costs have fallen by about 46% per train mile, which is a huge figure. And a lot of that has been driven by new technology, new infrastructure, which has been, again, delivered by my team. So one of the key parts for which we are sadly renowned is those words, engineering overrun. You know, and it really messes up people's lives. So in the last 2 years, we've put a real focus on avoiding engineering overruns, and I'm delighted to say, as you can see on this graph, that we have more than halved possession overrun delay minutes in the last couple of years. So if you look at these two statistics now, I mean, this is the year just gone, this is the year before. This big blue block here, which is quite a proportion of the year just gone, was just caused by two things at Christmas. So one was issues we had on West Coast, replacing a 4-track underbridge over a canal. So we had to take the track off, take the bridge out, put a new bridge back, track, and away we went. And that got into some difficulties, primarily due to the high winds over Christmas. And then we also decided to make a deliberate decision to delay the service in Cardiff, an interim handbag, as part of the largest single commissioning of signalling ever undertaken by Network Rail. Made a deliberate decision to do that because we wanted to give certainty to the train operator. So we've been running a bus service all week. We decided we'd carry on running the bus service for 4 more hours. But you can see the impact that those have. That really puts this into scale. As a total of the delay minutes on the network, and in carrying out this huge block of work, these minutes are a fraction of 1%. They're less than 0.5% of the total delay minutes on the network, and that's something that I'm really proud that we've made a big difference to the travelling public. And our delivery certainty has improved considerably. So at the point at which I joined in 14, we were only delivering around 62% of our entry into service milestones. So these are the important milestones, you know, of all of our GRIP process. The GRIP 6 entry into service milestone is the key, because that's the point at which you start to get the passenger benefits. So in 2014-15, we were down at 62%. We put in place a really structured enhancement improvement plan. We drove that up to 82%, and then last year up to 92%. And it was 92% because we missed one milestone. So I'm really proud of the focus that we've put into delivering these large blocks of work on time. So just to finish, I really wanted to cover the big peaks that we get in our workload. And Christmas last year was really noticeable. And really notable for a couple of big facts. So firstly, it was the largest programme of works at Christmas ever. Every year I've been here, it's been the largest ever. They get bigger and bigger. We delivered some record-breaking amounts of work, but what that hides is the fact that the beginning of Christmas was really marked by high winds, and we had some of the largest road cranes in the UK out in operation, like the ones we were using on the West Coast. The middle, between Christmas and New Year, was freezing fog, and I can distinctly remember standing at 4 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast main line, and it was freezing as we were trying to get the bridge handed back and get back into passenger service. And of course, over New Year we had torrential rain, and again standing on the platform at Cardiff as we were getting through the final stages of the signal commissioning, being absolutely soaking wet through. So Christmas tends to be our biggest block, but of course Easter and the May bank holidays are again huge programs of work. So at Christmas we had 1,000 possessions, something like 3,000 work sites. The last 2 bank holidays, very large statistics. You can see there 900 work sites, 300 odd possessions and 255 projects. And some big blocks of work in there. So commissioning the London Bridge substation, which will provide power for the new trains, and the really important commissioning of Shenfield, which is the big new track layout that's supporting the introduction of the first Crossrail trains just later this month. So unfortunately a slightly constrained presentation, and I'm unable to take questions, but I do hope that's given you a bit of a flavour of the kinds of work that we carry out in Network Rail, specifically in my team of infrastructure projects, and the progress that we've been making in delivering our programmes on time and minimising the impact to the travelling passenger. So thank you very much.